Thank you so much for having me. I'm totally impressed by Thema Ice because for years everybody in my community was saying, so confusing, all these different product carbon footprint approaches, what's the right one? And you guys just said, well, why don't we get everybody together and figure it out? Which is really excellent. So I'm actually here because my government asked me to be here and wanted me to begin the process of partnering with issues related to carbon footprints and environmental product declarations here. So here we are. Here's who I am. My organization is a not-for-profit, and its fundamental mission is to support fact-based environmental decision-making. We have a very diverse funding source. We do take money from business, and we really do believe that business has to be the drive for environmental improvement. I often say that I do not want to attack business or destroy business. I want to subvert it. I want businesses to make their money by making the world a better place. The American Center for Life Cycle Assessment is the professional society for life cycle assessment for the U.S. We're growing quite rapidly, about 30% per year. We do annual conferences. We certify life cycle assessment professionals, and I believe we're the only organization in the world that does that. And we did that specifically to avoid greenwashing. We wanted that when people hired someone to do a life cycle assessment, they hired someone who knew what he was doing or what she was doing. So we've heard a lot about legislation and policy in the EU here in the last day or so. Believe it or not, even in the US we are doing some things. We have several versions of different bills in our federal legislation. The House has passed a version for climate change, which includes carbon footprints. The Senate bill, which is under consideration and has not passed yet, also includes carbon footprints. Most also include some kind of requirement for a life cycle assessment. And in the past, there has been legislation in the US which has passed, which requires the use of life cycle assessment for different pieces of our energy system primarily. One of the more interesting things that's happened recently is that there was an executive order, which is an executive order in the United States is an order from the White House to all government agencies that they are supposed to follow. And this particular order required that the federal government do its Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon footprints and to have a plan for doing its Scope 3 carbon footprints. And the effective date for that is, I believe, in May this year. So by May of this year, every agency is going to have to come back to the White House and say, and this is how we're going to do Scope 3 carbon footprints. So it'll be interesting to see what happens then. Just to put this in context, the federal government buys everything. It's a very large portion of the U.S. economy. Over 20% of the U.S. economy is through the U.S. federal government. So, well, we have been aware of what is happening elsewhere in the world. And particularly of interest has been the environment work in France, which you heard from Sylvain yesterday. Exactly how that's going. And what the take on this in the U.S. is that if in France they're going to require environmental product declarations on everything, then we expect the EU to follow. It seems to be the dynamic here. And that could create a perfectly legal but real technical barrier to trade for anyone trying to sell things to France or ultimately to the EU. So this raised a lot of surprise to the U.S. government, and finally action I think is going to take place. I know you all know what product category rules are, but I believe we're being recorded, and maybe I can just say a moment or two what it is. Product category rules are created by program operators. The ISO 14025 standards does not say what a program operator must be or must do in order to be a good program operator, merely that they have to take certain steps. But every product category rule is a detailed description of how to do the life cycle assessment. So in sort of terms of like a laboratory scientist, this is the description for running the instrument for calculating the concentration of a pollutant, for example. A product category rule should make it possible to get the same life cycle numbers no matter who's doing the measurements, and that's its whole goal. It also gives you information which is environmental product declaration specific, like what the label looks like, and information about verification. Okay, so why? You know, we want the product category rule because it makes it possible to make a direct comparison between one product and the other that have the same function. It's pretty simple. But it also allows you, if it's done properly, you should have a whole system of product category rules which allows us to use lifecycle information just like Lego blocks and add up all the pieces of like bricks in a building, and at the end you will know what the environmental impact of the building itself is. That's the whole goal of this system of management. It should be transparent. That means you really know what you're doing, you really know what you're getting. It's developed in an open and transparent fashion, and it's flexible. It allows one to have product category rules which focus on just one thing, like a carbon footprint, or on many things. Whatever makes sense for that particular product, that is what the environmental product declaration should be, and what the product category rules should specify. So it's really the pivot on which carbon footprints and all environmental product declarations run. So it's essential that we get product category rules right. And there are things in the standards that tell you what you have to do. They say that the product category rule itself needs to be validated by 3 independent individuals with expertise in the product system and expertise in life cycle assessment. And so those 3 reviewers tell you whether your product category rule itself is correct. And then once you use the rule to do an environmental product declaration, you have to have yet another person doing an independent verification that the environmental product declaration was done according to the product category rule. So the whole idea is to avoid greenwashing, to make it very clear and transparent, to make sure that the numbers are as correct as they can be, and that the information is communicated well to the consumer. But there are some challenges. First of all, product category rules are hard to find. They are distributed all over the place in the computers of the program operators in different countries. There are some places which are trying to be aggregators of product category rules, but even those are kind of hard to find. And I have to say, I have made a concerted effort to get product category rules from the efforts that's going on in France. And even though I speak French, I could not find them. So not so easy to do. There's also a problem with redundancy. There can be multiple product category rules for the same product, and that's a real problem because what it does is it leads to operator shopping. If you don't like the product category rule because your product doesn't look good when you follow that rule, you find someone else to write you a rule that looks better. And it's real, it's really happening, and we need to stop it. Because you really lose total credibility in a situation like that. So the public, I think, the consumer needs to have some way to have faith in product category rules, and that the environmental product declarations that are derived from those product category rules are true. Now, I will admit that maybe 1/100th of 1% of consumers is actually going to try to figure this out. But it only takes one of them to find out that there's a flaw to make the whole system blow up in our faces. So I really think that we need organizations that drive creation and updating of product category rules, because these things have to change over time as the economy and as technology changes. So I'm here just to make a suggestion, which I hope we can talk about. I suggest that we form national product category rule repositories that are available on the internet. Everybody can look at them. in that those repositories become responsible for accrediting program operators. You don't get your product category rule into the repository unless you meet the accreditation requirement, whatever that is. And then the repository is responsible for keeping all the product category rules in one place, so redundancy is eliminated. It's responsible for educating and outreach to industry and industry groups and to consumer groups about the product category rules and about what that means for their environmental product declarations. It should be responsible for ongoing system improvement and to be responsible for cooperation with other national repositories for product category rules. So it's a pretty simple system. And as we've heard over the last day, there's several countries that kind of sort of have that already. Japan, Korea, there's programs in Sweden, there's a program in Australia, there's one in Malaysia, there's even kind of sort of this program in China. So we already have a step towards having national repositories for product category rules. And I suggest that we strengthen those and that those national repositories work together. In the US, we're not just saying this because it's a nice idea, we're actually trying to do this ourselves. So my organization is setting up a national product category rule repository for the US. And our first steps have been that we now have a memorandum of understanding with ASTM International, which is an international standardization body. And we agreed that where standards need to be written, we will start them up and then they will go through the full standardization process. And that where appropriate, we will call out their standards inside of our product category rules. It's a very simple natural arrangement. We've already held a workshop in conjunction with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and interested parties to talk about product category rules and how we can build the infrastructure in the United States. Our first focus is on the building and construction industry. I think that of all the industries available, they are the ones most ready to move ahead. I think they're followed closely behind by the agricultural industry, food and agriculture. We are in the process of drafting guidance for product category rule operators. Okay, so this is an example of we will write the guidance and we will pass it off to ASTM International to go through the whole consensus process and make that into a standard available for everyone. And of course, we're fundraising. Anybody who works for an NGO knows that your job is to raise money. And people give me money. All those things have to happen. We are making that a reality in the United States. And when I talk about interested parties, we have a pretty diverse set of interested parties. These are the people, for the most part, who were at the workshop I just mentioned, talking about setting up product category rules. And they include ASTM International Standardization Body, the Construction Specification Institute, which you may not know, but all over North America, they write the format for commercial construction. Everybody uses it, so they're kind of a nexus for the construction industry. The U.S. Green Building Council, Green Seal, Athena Institute, all not-for-profits associated with these sorts of issues in the U.S. And then many parts of government at the federal level, at the state level, and even at the local level are participating in this effort. So, and industry is there too. You probably recognize the American Chemistry Society, Microsoft, the Steel Recycling Institute. So we have a pretty broad coalition moving ahead on this. This list of interested parties keeps growing. In terms of international cooperation, I'm going to just put some things on the table and suggest that this might be something that will facilitate cooperation. We intend to use the UN SPSC codes for our product category rules. So that, if you're not familiar with that, those are e-commerce codes that are operated out of the UN. They're free. You can get them online at unspsc.org. And they cover the entire economy. They have over 40,000 separate purchase codes. And the level of these, and they're hierarchical, So you have a purchase code for live animals, and then you can have underneath that a purchase codes for live beef or live llamas, or when they're actually there. And it's possible then to write product category rules either for down at the lowest level of that hierarchy where there's 40,000 of them, or up a level higher if it's appropriate to say, we'll look at product category rules for all animals. But the key is that if we all use product category rules, then we won't have use UNSPSC for product category rule, then we won't have overlap. And we will know what it is, what the product is that we are talking about. And if we find we need more, UNSPSC is willing to add more to their list. So, and then the other thing that I think we really should, as a practical matter, take on is really focus in our international exchanges on climate change. Because we can get agreement. It's a global issue. CO2 emitted in South Africa has just as much effect as CO2 emitted in Alaska. And we are all in it together in this manner. But when we start talking about other environmental impacts, those tend to be regional and local, and how well they can be modeled and at what level they are valued is very different in different places because of the information capabilities in different places and because of social situations in different places. So I think we can have agreement on carbon footprinting, and maybe eventually we will have some kind of consensus reached on some other environmental impacts, but we would make a big difference if we could just start here at product category rules. And just a few conclusions. I think we're all blowing in the same wind. All of our countries have to deal with the climate change issue. It's really important. It's a driver. But that together, this group has the potential for really helping to make a difference, to making the Earth a better place by cooperating. And finally, I never get a chance to say this publicly, so I'm going to take it. For our friends working on the environment in France, vive la France.